Well, to break this all down a bit more for you, let's bring in French politics expert Paul Smith from the University of Nottingham. Paul, the LREM, that's Macron's regional candidate, Sophie Cluzel's running now on the same ticket as Renaud Muselier, who's with Les Republicains, the more conservative party. What's the thinking here? Is Macron leaning even more to the right, or is this more strategical than anything else?
I think it's a bit of both. It certainly shows that Macron at the local level, his party hasn't really succeeded in making its profile clear. But it's also, we've got to think about, you mentioned this idea of PACA. Well, one party that's very powerful in PACA, of course, is the Rassemblement National. So we're coming at this from two ends. First, you've got to think about the advantages to Macron, but also what is it that Les Républicains and Renaud Muselier, despite of opposition within his own party, what does he think is the deal? This is a deal that normally we might have expected to happen after the first round of voting, because it's a two-round election process. But what they want to do here, and it's Castex, as the Prime Minister has been one of the key brokers here, is to get that deal sorted before the first round of voting.
So what do the French conservatives, that middle ground conservative party that's further to the right than Macron, but a little to the left of the far right party, what do they think about this alliance? Isn't this in a way Macron just chipping away at it more and more, so perhaps it might disappear altogether?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, this is, for some people, this is a risk of the party splitting in two and almost disappearing. And this has been a risk that the right has faced ever since Macron was elected. It's become exacerbated with the disappearance of the one candidate who might have challenged Macron, who might have brought all the different elements together, François Baroin. And now you have the party, the right of the right, as it were, pulling in one direction, and then you have that more Macron compatible section of the party that, people like Christian Estrosi, the mayor of Nice, which is in PACA, and people like Muselier saying, look, if we agree with the president, broadly speaking, shouldn't we be doing a deal with his party? So there is a really serious, this is a fault line that's been there. And of course, elections always put pressure on those fault lines.
They certainly do. And of course, the biggest election is coming up next year. That's the French presidential election. What kind of effect might all of this have on that vote next year, would you say?
Well, I think what will depend is the various results in the various different regions. There are two really key candidates, it seems to me, for the right. Xavier Bertrand in the Hauts-de-France and then Valérie Pécresse in the Île-de-France. And depending how they do, they're in very different circumstances. Bertrand is fighting against the extreme right, against the Rassemblement National. It's a different kind of situation in Île-de-France. And I could imagine that if one of them does extraordinarily well in their regional election, then one of those could emerge as potential serious rival to Macron on the right. And then the right will also have to decide whether it's going to actually hold a primary or not. So these elections, although they are only regional elections, you led with a story on Modi and India. Although they're regional elections, they're important at a national level, particularly because of their proximity to the presidential election next year and the right-wing primaries, if they take place in the autumn.
Paul, thank you for that. Paul Smith there speaking to us from the University of Nottingham.